Does it say? Rotate. Orientation is locked. I don't. I think it's live.
She says she thinks it's live. Look, what a cool topic. Are we live? We're live. My producer, Tori, is getting it set up for me.
Oh.
Is it sideways?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We're trying to fix it to make it.
I don't know why it's doing that. It says orientation is locked after all this hard work.
We're having technical difficulties here. It's still like, it's like this.
Honey's getting upset.
I think that's okay if it's like that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, why not?
Looks kind of cool.
Yeah, it's working.
What
does everybody think about the lengthwise? Can you sorry?
You can only see me down.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't.
I don't know. Okay.
Okay, here we go. Thanks everybody for joining yet another live chat today. If you've heard, we're talking about adventuring with dogs. Dogs like these little guys here. Oh, sorry, North. Oh, good boy, good boy. Yeah, it's okay. Oh, now you like to jump up on me, huh? Like this guy, like this one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Adventure. Look at the camera, North, and say, "Baroo." Yeah. Okay. Go on. Go to the woods. Yeah. So adventuring with dogs. I think it's a cool topic. Just going to enjoy a delicious Tread Lightly. It's a great light beer by Muskoka Brewery, who is working with me on these live chats. And Muskoka Brewery is offering Tread Lightly and also Detour in 355 milliliter cans, which I don't know. I like both cans, but I kind of like the smaller cans because it's just like the perfect amount and never gets warm. So cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining. Again, we're talking about adventuring with dogs, if you didn't grasp that from my introduction of North. And yeah, I'm going to cover kind of a few topics, including why bring dogs on adventures, why bring dogs onto the bush, where, from my opinion, has been a great place to find a good bush dog. What are some things you can teach your dog to bring them on canoe trips so they'll be better in the canoe? How do you train your dog to go on whitewater trips? A lot of people will see me with my dog and they'll run around the rapids and meet me at the end. How to train them to do that? How to train them to pull sled? What you need to bring your dog winter camping. And I'm also gonna, share some gear ideas for dogs and share a few stories from the Arctic and expeditions I've done with my dog, my old dog Buck, my dog North, and another dog I had before that was amazing. And also some really key things when it comes to just like dog training that you might not have heard of. I'm not really an expert dog trainer per se or anything. I don't work in the business of training dogs, but I've had dogs my whole life that I've brought into the bush, and I brought them on some pretty big trips, so I've learned a thing or two about it over the years. We're also going to do a little Q&A as well on we're going to do a Q&A as well on just whatever, any questions that you might have in this general realm of topic of presentation topic here. But anyways, yeah, so I guess what I've had the best, people say, Jim, where do you get a good dog? Where do I get a dog like my old dog Buck? Where do you get a dog like North? I mean, no dog's ever going to be like that, right? You're never going to get kind of two dogs that are the same. They'll have their own personality, and they're all going to be good for their own, reasons, and bad for their own reasons. But in general, and this is just from my experience, I've had great luck getting dogs that are free. Well, a lot of the time, the best dogs I've ever had were dogs that were given away, that people were giving away, and as opposed to breeding to sell. And there's multiple reasons for that, but for me, it's either been like farm dogs or bush dogs. So somebody that has a dog sled team, or somebody that lives on a remote property that used to run dogs, or takes their dogs into the bush a lot of the time. Farm dogs have been great as well. A lot of the time, that's when they're giving them away for free. And I think the reason for that is that they're dogs that are bred not to just create more dogs to sell them to make money, but they're dogs that were bred and they're used for work. So they're working dogs, and as opposed to the more dogs you have, the more money you make, it was, we can't have that many dogs, so we just want to keep the best possible ones and breed them. And I think that often, of course, there's great dogs from any walk of life, or anywhere you get it, you can have good or bad dogs. So, but from my experience, that's been the case. Now, nowadays, back in the day, anything that wasn't a purebred that was a mutt was just like a mutt. It was like free or cheap, or you pay for the shots or whatever. But now it's not just a mutt, right? It's a doggedy, it's a mix. It's a doggedy doodle, or a doggedy diggity doodle, or a diggly doggly doodly doodle. And that's like 4 times the price. So the more mixed the dog is, the more you pay. So nowadays, people are starting to catch on to this trend that some of these mutts are pretty darn good dogs, and people are charging for them. And I mean, that's okay. So North came from Mississauga Reserve up by Blind River. He's a bush dog. His mother was originally from Doquis. Buck was a bush dog. I got him from Alex Mathias in the Temagami region. He was kind of the end of a long line of bush dogs that were used as sled dogs when indigenous people of the region, and everybody kind of trapped, and those dogs were used. Each individual had about 3 dogs. They never had the big teams that became more popular when sled dog racing became a thing, and people had smaller teams to pull themselves and pull gear and that on the trap lines in the winter. And so that's where I've had good luck. And if you want to take your dog winter camping with you, you might want to consider getting a dog that's got a thicker fur coat. And now you don't have to. I mean, in the deep cold, if you're going up, it's going to be -40. Yeah, some dogs that just don't have that fur coat are going to feel the cold a lot more than a dog with a good thick coat. So you want to keep that in mind to an extent. But one of the things I noticed is a lot of the time when you are winter camping, you're moving around, especially if you have a hot tent. And I brought my dog that was sort of like a hound lab cross on a lot of winter camping trips, and we had like a good fleece dog jacket for him. My brother Ted brings his dog Bella on trips. What do you got there? Oh, cool. Yeah, my brother Ted, Tori brought some props for me, has brought his dog Bella on trips where it gets quite cold, and she's got like a full dog jacket and a full like turtleneck that comes up and even keeps her ears warm. So if you go online and you research it, you can actually find some things that will keep your dog pretty warm in the winter. But if you're just going to be sitting there and ice fishing or stuff like that, and you want to bring your dog along, overall in the winter, a dog with a thick fur coat is going to be a lot more comfortable. Buck had a really thick fur coat. That's my old dog. And it was great in the winter. His like perfect temperature was like -10, and he could sleep outside and be happy if it was -30. In fact, he'd try to get out of the tent, escape the tent. It was too hot. And preferred to sleep outside. North doesn't have that size of a fur coat. He sleeps indoors almost all the time, so if he was like an outdoor dog and we were letting him sleep outside and he was building up that fur coat, he'd be able to handle like the coldest winters around here for sure. But even just as he is now with his winter coat, he's comfortable sleeping outside and prefers to sleep outside rather than sleep in the tent when we're winter camping up until about minus 15. And then he can come in when he wants. A lot of people ask me about dogs' paws if they get cold, and and it's amazing. Dogs, especially northern breeds, really have an amazing miracle of circulation in their paws. And what that means is that their arteries and veins are really close together. So in humans' hands and feet, your arteries and veins are separated. But with huskies and most dogs, what happens is that warm blood from their heart that's being pumped into their feet touches. So their arteries and veins are almost touching, and that warms the cold blood that's coming back to their heart on the way there. So it's almost like, like not antifreeze, but yeah, that warmth is continually warming up. Plus they have those really thick pads. So dog booties aren't really meant to keep their feet warm per se, but more so to protect against abrasion. So the time you want to put dog booties on is if it's like, especially if it's on a trail, if there's kind of like an icy snow, and especially if they're running. A lot of the time when, I'm winter camping or trekking with my dogs, they're not running enormous distances like a sled dog would run 100 kilometers in a day. They're walking or trotting, pulling their own sled beside me. So it's not going to be so tough on their paws. But these are some by Muttlucks, and yeah, basically they're just protection. Sled dog booties, proper sled dog booties are actually a little, to be honest, a little less, a little not as thick as this, but they have a little elasticy strap here. This doesn't have the elastic strap, so this one kind of comes undone. But the good ones will have like an elasticy strap like that, and so they'll hold on a little tighter, and that will really help prevent against abrasion and stuff like that for sure. The other thing I use that is great for that and for North's paws, which I use a lot, is like, it's called like Musher's Companion or something like that, and it's basically like a natural wax that you can rub on, and generous amounts on the dog's pads and in between his toes, and it just protects any ice from building up and stuff like that. So on my last trek I did up in the Temagami region with North, the first time he'd ever put that on was there, and at first I was putting it on and he was like, what the heck is this? And but then the last time I put it on, he was totally cool with it, because I think he figured out that it helped. And so, yeah, I did, it wasn't particularly cold on this recent Northern Ontario trek I did with North. I think we did over 100 kilometers, and I did bring a dog jacket for him, which because it wasn't that cold, I'd put that on colder nights once we got to camp. And then the other thing I bring for him is a ground pad, which is just like a, kind of like a semi-inflatable sort of ground pad that I double up. But oftentimes you can cut boughs for them too. It doesn't take too many boughs for a bow wow. Thank you. So yeah, that works great too. And they really like to curl up on the boughs. But it's not a bad idea. And I have taken dogs in the past to cold tenting. So some people will bring like a sleeping bag for their dog, which you can totally do. I've actually used my big down parka. It's so warm, I bring it a lot of the time for if I stop to throw it on, or when I get to camp and my clothes are feeling kind of wet, I'll throw that on to get warm. Of course, I use it in the Arctic too when I'd stop for lunch, or I'd never travel in it because it's just too warm to travel. So a lot of the time, when I'd bring that big down like Canada Goose jacket, I'm always moving around so much that I never ended up wearing it, and it became like a dog sleeping bag a lot of the time. And so my dog would kind of just tuck into that, and that would work. But yeah, you can kind of customize something, or just bring a sleeping bag for them too in winter. And I find that dogs in general like to help out. Like, when I pull out North's harness in the morning, he'd get all excited and run over me just like it was a leash, because he'd think, okay, though our walk's starting today, we get to do a walk, and he'd see me pulling a sled and everybody else pulling a sled, and he just felt like he was like part of the pack, you know what I mean? A part of the team. And you can teach any dog to pull. Some dogs are more skittish than others, and some dogs will get like scared of the toboggan behind them bumping into their feet and stuff like that. But there's ways you can go about training them to not be scared. If they're scared of the sled behind them, if you use a really long rope, and then you can kind of slowly shorten it, which is essentially the same way you have to train a horse, because horses, because they have that instinct to not like anything behind them, so they think prey is coming up behind them. So they get spooked. So you have to train them with a long rope. If you do the same thing with a dog that's skittish, that works. But a lot of the time what happens is a dog won't realize that it can move, and it'll feel the weight of a sled. Obviously start lighter, and if you feel the weight of a sled, it'll think that it's stuck. They'll think they're stuck. So what you do to combat that is you take a dog treat. My dog really seems to like liver bites, and you put that just out of its reach, like by an inch, and the dog will reach again, it'll reach a bit more, and then it'll just pull the sled, and it'll realize it pulled the sled. Then you do the same thing. You offer it a treat, and you bring it to the max that it will go, and you put it just out of their reach, and it'll pull the sled a bit more, and sure enough, within a very short period of time, the dog will realize it can get that sled moving, and it'll go. And the more practice, the better the dog will be about getting unstuck and getting untangled and stuff like that. I use kind of like an X-back style harness, but there's other harnesses that you can use too. This style of harness here is one that's made for towing like more heavy duty loads. You can see all the padding at the front. You see they have like competitions where dogs pull weight and stuff like that. So this would be one that could be used in that. But the way this works is the harness kind of comes low down like this. And so that doesn't pull like an X-back harness. If you're pulling a low load, it kind of pulls down on its legs and forces it to kind of bend its back legs, and it can't pull as well. And then this can get tangled under their paws, but eventually they kind of learn pretty quick how to not get tangled and how to untangle themselves as well. So that's great. And yeah, I think that's kind of key for winter camping with dogs, just making sure that you have what it's going to take, that you're going out there with a dog that has the warm coat, and warm enough coat, and or that you have proper coat for them, a ground pad. My dogs, North and Buck, being northern dogs, they never have needed a sleeping bag, but a good ground pad has been really good for them, and just a dog jacket, but never really a sleeping bag on top of that. But if your dog, it doesn't have that fur coat, you might consider doing that. And I guess, another question too, before I get into summer stuff, is that some people ask, is sort of like, why bring a dog out there? Well, obviously it's just cool and fun to bring a dog into the bush with you. But yeah, a lot of people traditionally have traveled with dogs. Dogs have been part of, I guess, a lot of humans' culture for many, many years, traveling with them. They've been used as draft animals all over the place. So there's something about it that just kind of connects with me. It just kind of makes my experience in the bush better. But when the dog can actually also pull its own weight, and stuff like that, like my dogs have when they're pulling stuff when you're winter camping, that's great. Also, they're amazing at alerting you of bears. Bears and dogs can become problems, but that's more when you have a permanent camp or a cabin and you have dogs tied up outside. But a lot of the time the dog will warn you when a bear's coming close, or even chase off a bear. And interesting story here. My old dog Buck actually chased a black bear out of camp. Tori and I were on a river in Quebec called the East Natashquan, and the translation for in Cree or Innu more specifically is place where bear are hunted. So that kind of tells you there's probably some bear along this river. And anyway, so yeah, we get to this camp, and there's really nowhere to camp. Not many places to camp at all. And there's a sandbar there. Okay, that's a place to camp because it was just kind of trees and steep banks for a long stretch. And this is the only place we've seen to camp. And it's getting late, so we pull over, and there's bear prints on this beach. And they didn't look particularly big, or they looked maybe somewhat fresh. And Tori was a little concerned. And I said, "Oh, it'll be okay. It'll be okay." And anyways, we start to cook up some food. I think we're cooking fish or something that smells really good. And Buck's like just watching the fire like this. Well, we hear something in the bush, and it's pitch black at this point. So you hear something. Tori's like, "What was that?" And we were sitting with like our backs facing the bush and our fronts facing the fire. I think we moved around to the other side of the fire, but I was just kind of playing it cool. Oh, it can't be anything, because when does a bear just burst out of the woods? Well, anyways, sure enough, Tori was right, and a bear just burst right out of the woods onto our sandbar campsite. Not close, but not super close, but like 30 meters away or less. Breaks out like this, and with that, Buck just turned around and charge barked this thing, running at it like an absolute bat out of hell. And the bear was so scared, the bear just completely 180'd, poos itself, and runs away into the woods. And at the same time, I fire a bear banger, which goes over Buck's head and blows up right over the bear. And at that point, I'm like, "Tori, make loud noise, like," and I did have a shotgun, which I was going to fire another, warning shot in the air, which I never did, but I heard the bear leaving. Wasn't really leaving quite as fast as I'd hoped it was going to leave. So anyways, that night we put all our food barrels on top of each other, because we couldn't really put them that far, but we put them at the other end of the gravel bar. We put our pots and pans on top with like rocks in it, and so we'd hear if a bear was like knocking it over. And I heard the bear go into the river in the dark that night and swim across the river. And sure enough, the next morning there it was. If it was the same one, I don't know for sure. But typically when there's a bear coming at night, it's typically a male. And anyways, I just see this big black bear. I don't know, man, probably weighed 400 pounds, just walking down the other side of the river. Didn't seem too scared, and Buck was looking at it. And anyways, Tori and I ended up just packing up a little quicker than normal and moving on. But yeah, that's a great reason to have had Buck there for sure. Like, that all worked out great. I fired the bear banger. That scared Buck back to us. It scared the bear away. So, bear protection and camaraderie, absolutely. And the ability to pull sleds. Also, dogs just have an amazing ability sometimes to tell if the ice is safe, if the ice is thick. I've heard all kinds of stories where dogs just in a blizzard know exactly the right way to go, when people don't know. And the best people that know dogs and trust dogs, even if they're getting disoriented, but the dogs are going, they just know to trust the dogs and to follow the dogs. And I've heard some amazing stories of people over the years doing that. And yeah, there's definitely a bond that you get with animals. It strikes a bit of a primal chord, and that's one thing that I find that's really neat. And yeah, so if you've watched some of my YouTube videos, you've seen that we've taken our dogs on float planes, and even on I've taken my old dog Buck on commercial flights. We have a big crate, and he'll fly on an airline. I'll put a treat in there, and and he'll climb in. Some dogs react to that better than others. I've heard of some people giving them like Gravol or something to kind of calm them so they don't bark. But depending on the dog, some of them don't mind. Buck didn't seem to mind. He was just a chill dog, and even on the float plane and all that. That's been great, and he's come on our fly-in canoe trips in northern Saskatchewan, the Mountain River, Northwest Territories. There was the Porcupine River, northern Saskatchewan. He came on. Also, the East Natashquan too. So, we brought him on a lot of serious 2-week plus canoe trips with us. One of the things that's challenging too about bringing your dog is that you got to bring food for them as well. And so one thing that I have, there's a few different dog backpacks on the market. I haven't really looked too closely to see what's the best thing right now, but this one by Rough Wear, I think it's called the Palisades pack, is the best one I've found. And what it is, it's a kind of harness that goes on like this, and this pops on, and this is what clips your dog really comfy. And then this goes on top, and there's just little tabs that you pop through this like that, right, on 4 corners. And then that way you can take this on and off quickly, which is really key. So you can pull this on and off quickly, and that way you don't need to unclip the whole thing. So this stays on, and this comes on and off. And so when you're bringing a dog, well, they can carry their own food. And so what I do is I'll take this and I'll put, and this is obviously they would pull it on a sled in the winter, but I'll take this, and this also has like little water tanks in it as well. So if you're going to go a ways from water on a backpacking trip or a long portage where you might not be near water, they can carry their own water. And so I'll put their food, their kibble, into waterproof packs, like little dry bags in here. So even if this dunks, it'll have positive flotation because those dry bags float. So if you do that, you're not gonna run into a situation where if they go swimming, this is gonna make it harder for them to swim. It'll actually help float them, and they can carry water. And honestly, the reason I like this one is because it's durable. Pretty much all the other dog backpacks that I've used before this one have all just fallen apart and worn thin and just have not been good. So that one I've had good luck with. And so you can put that right before you get to the portage trail. You can clip the dog backpack to another pack, put it on the dog, grab your stuff, go. Obviously backpacking, Tori and I took our old dog across the Rocky Mountains. We backpacked from Jasper to Grand Cache, Alberta. I think it was 120 kilometers or more. Geez, I don't remember. Anyways, about 100 miles. And that was amazing. And Buck carried, a backpack the whole way. And we ended up putting, when his food got less and less, we started putting other things in there, pots and pans, and just our, mess kits and things like that we didn't worry about getting broken. We'd put in there, and it was a big help. So definitely, I think that's a great idea. For canoeing, when you're gonna bring a dog in the canoe, okay, like I'll be honest with you, at first. I'm going to get into a detour here. This is another good Muskoka. Muskoka Brewery has a lot of good different beers. And they're local too. They're just, for me anyways, fairly local. They're just in Muskoka out of Bracebridge. But yeah, when you're getting into canoeing, it's a lot of the time people don't bring their dog because, canoes can be tippy and your dog can be jumping all over the place, and people are scared to kind of take the plunge and take the dog with them. Honestly, a good thing to do is just take them and just deal with a bit of a gong show with the dog. for the first trip. It's not going to be as bad as you think 90% of the time. Some dogs are more challenging than others. Like my brother's dog's got a lot of pointer in her, and she's kind of more bouncing off the walls kind of thing. So some dogs can be more challenging than others for sure. But what's really good to teach them when they're in a canoe is just kind of like basic commands. And so what's really important is in the boat, out of the boat. Right? So when you get there in the boat and they jump in right away, and we taught this to North, and where we live on the Magnetowan River, there's canoeists that go by sometimes. Well, North decided that, I was down by the water and you see some canoeists come along and pull over after running a rapid, and North went over and tried to jump in the person's boat. I want to go with you. Oh God, we're going on a canoe trip. Here we go. He was ready to like ditch me. And the person was like surprised and didn't think it was too funny because it almost tipped her. So she was soloing a whitewater boat, and I was sitting there laughing. And anyways, what probably wasn't the best scenario, but it was funny. So so in the boat, out of the boat, key things to teach your dog. And then front of the boat, back of the boat, again, key things to teach a dog. And I often use hand gestures, and it takes a while. You can use treats. Another one that's pretty good is just other side. And like really what that means to the dog is just kind of like move, because essentially what happens is a dog will get and they'll lie completely on one side of the boat, and the boat will be like this. And that's not very comfortable to paddle a boat when it's like that, because your lower back's all like twisted and that. So you just say other side, and it kind of just means get up and reposition yourself. I don't know if they actually know it means move to the other side, but it means like get up and kind of move. And a lot of the time the dog, have a lot of gear in the canoe, so the dog just sits on or lies on top of packs, and that's pretty good. And then also just if I'm on a whitewater trip and I'm bringing my spray deck, they can just lie on top of the spray deck, which is great too, because if the boat tips or whatever, they're not going to get trapped under it. Like I wouldn't put a dog in the spray deck. I'd put them on top, just because you wouldn't want them to get trapped under there, which I guess could potentially happen. So they usually just kind of sit on top, and it's almost like a little hammock for them. And the old dog I had, his name was Merlin. He got so good that he would actually like stand up in the rapids with 1 feet sort of on one gunnel and one on the spray deck, but he'd have his front feet on one gunnel, his back feet on the other gunnel, and I swear he would like help us from tipping. So if we felt like we're tipping, he'd go to one side, and we swear he even like prevented us from tipping before. This dog, he's such a smart dog like that, right? And he noticed, and I noticed he did the same thing I noticed North doing on this tomogamy adventure we do. And dogs are pack animals, right? So one of the things I noticed North doing is he wants to kind of keep his pack together. So he'll be, let's say North is walking in front of you, and he'll keep looking back to see where the last person of the group is. And if he sees somebody falling further behind, he'll start purposely kind of cutting me off or slowing me down or slowing up, waiting for the next person to catch up. And I notice him doing this a bunch of times. And he'll see, oh, wait up, and he'll look back, and then he'll cut me off and slow me down, or just do things to intentionally slow me down as the person in the very back catches up, so we can all travel like a pack together. And for the same reason, I think sometimes, even if he's not hurt or anything, or he's obviously, but if we start walking away and he's stuck, he'll start kind of barking, yelping, hey, don't forget me, because he knows that he wants us to keep us all together. Which is kind of cool. And I saw that that's not the first dog I've seen do that. If someone's behind, purposely slowing you down to keep everyone safe. It's like they're worrying about people's safety, and they want to travel together in a pack. It's kind of cool. And then a lot of people ask me about like whitewater. How do you teach your dog to paddle whitewater? And yeah, so for more challenging rapids, I don't run them with the dog in the boat, because it's more weight, it's harder to see etc., right? So what I do is I let the dog off at the beginning of the portage or the beginning of the rapid, and they run around to the end and meet me there. And sometimes I'm amazed at how they know exactly where I'm going to end up. But then even sometimes I remember where the portage trail ends is like right at this like advanced eddy to catch. If you're running the rapid, you have to really like get over there and eddy out. And I remember one time coming down the rapid and then seeing the dog waiting for me, looking at me like, hey, why didn't you catch this eddy here? Like, you know, and I had to go down and I had to walk down a bit further and meet me. But yeah, they understand the trails, or they just seem to understand where you're going. And dogs are in general, not all dogs, but in general, very good swimmers. So like when it was North's first canoe trip that I took him on, first whitewater canoe trip, I put a life jacket on him. So it's maybe not a bad idea. I don't think they'd be any less safe to wear a life jacket. You're not running enormous rapids where they could be in a situation where they get stuck in a hole and have to pull their jacket off like a rafter or anything like that. But in general, I mean, a dog is a better swimmer than Michael Phelps and a faster runner than Usain Bolt. So 99.9% of the time when you hear of somebody drowning in a river, even, they drown in a river, it's because they went in to try to save their dog. And every time the dog was fine and the person dies. And they went in to try to save their dog and the dog lived. So I think we don't realize how good the vast majority of dogs are at swimming, that they're way better. And I remember one time with my brother, we were running Natch Rapids on the Petawawa. And we had our own dog. We had our old dog who's a very good swimmer. And we were just like seeing the dog swimming alongside us. And we were kind of like freaking out, like, no, Bad, get to shore. We're like, this dog can't swim down this rapid. It's too intense. And I just go to Ted. I'm like, Ted, just worry about yourself, man. Like, we didn't have a ton of whitewater experience at this time. So it was one of my dog's kind of, I guess, first rapids. Anyway, so we're ahead of the dog. We run this very short and intense rapid. I look back and I see the dog go down the first drop like this. And midway down the first drop, it spins 180, faces upriver, and then front ferries into an impossible to catch side eddy that you would have to be like an expert kayaker to catch, and just avoids the entire rapid and gets out and doesn't even get its hair wet. And we're just like, wow, or it doesn't even get its head wet hair. Anyway, so so not all dogs are going to be able to do that, but they all seem to know how to front ferry, which is when you face upriver on an angle and swim, and makes your net movement sideways. So that's pretty impressive. And then after that, he kind of figured, oh, I never want to do this again. So he didn't. And then, the same thing actually happened with North when I brought him. So what I did to train him, I had a life jacket on him, and I'm like, okay, here's the rapid. We're going to run this rapid. And I walked him right down to the end. And I was like, okay, boy, you're going to have to really try hard because we're going to run. Just kidding. I didn't say that. I just said, okay, North, here, wait, stay here. And I kind of I tried to indicate to him, where we would be, where we'd pick him up. But he didn't really understand too many of those commands. So first of all, the first rapid I ever run was like a class 1, class 1 plus. So nothing that's going to be dangerous in the first place. It's not going to be detrimental if he does go down it, right? And maybe this isn't for the faint at heart, but I don't see an issue with this at all. Anyway, so I see North coming to swim, and I was kind of a little bit worried. I go to shore, North. I'm trying to change. Go to shore. Well, sure enough, he did the same thing. He went down kind of the first part and then decided, I don't want to do this. And he got to shore, and sure enough, he ran around there and met us at the end, and we were happy and cheering. And then after that, he just kind of figured it out just to kind of run along shore. Then me and Tori did another trip with him. He got really confident at swimming, and he decided that he would like to just swim down like the Swifts and the easy class 1s for fun. And even ran back up to do it again when we were done. So, so like almost like an otter, like purposely swimming down the rapids for fun, right? So that's kind of, I think the best way to teach them is you start small on something, and they might swim down something easy, and then they kind of figure it out afterwards. But you use training, you use commands, but I guess essentially, you just kind of got to get out there with them. You know what I mean? Knowing if your dog swims or not at all is a good place to start, I'm sure. But 90% of dogs do, probably more than 90%. So yeah, training on the go. You might have a couple trips that are a bit chaotic here and there, but for the most part, it's really just fun and exciting. But before you head out, to definitely teach them to come when they're called. If you can whistle like a loud whistle like that, or like that, or or you can do bird calls that way too for fun. But if you can whistle and get them to come, that makes a big difference too. And they come when they're called. Carry treats, for sure. Super, super, super helpful, like that. But yeah, and then food is an important thing too. We talked about food a little, about what kind of food. So I like to bring like a high performance food, and that means that you could bring less. And this is especially for trips where your dog's gonna be like doing a lot of walking. Oftentimes on some of my canoe trips, the dog's just being paddled around and luxuriously just snoozes all day on the spray deck and doesn't do anything. And then the portages are like a fun walk for them, as we have to like beast mode all the stuff, and they kind of like, if they're not carrying a pack, is like, is much more enjoyable for them. But on trips where the dog's doing more work, backpacking, more portaging, or just longer trips where you don't want to carry as much weight, or you don't want the in your canoe, to go with like a high performance, high energy food. Oftentimes the same high energy foods are the same things that are fed to puppies, so like a puppy chow, or same thing that's fed to professional, like athletic dogs that run like the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest and all that. They have a really high energy food. I go with First Mate is the company. It's a Canadian company out of BC. I give them First Mate high performance. And if you're bringing X amount of calories for your dog, typical kibble is going to be this much, but you bring high performance kibble and it's going to be less bulk and a little bit less weight too. So more bang for your buck. So I would recommend doing that. And a really good thing I found is, anybody know what that is? That is a starter's pistol. So this is awesome. North is excited because he knows that we train and we play with this. So a great way to teach your dog not to be skittish in general is by using a starter's pistol. And a great way to teach it not to be gun shy. A lot of people like to just bring a firearm for bear safety, or even for do some hunting when they're in the bush, or just target practice or anything. And if you have a dog that gets super scared and runs away, it might, oftentimes when you're really far in the bush and a dog's scared of the gun, it just runs back to the tent. But sometimes it might run all the way back to your car, or all the way back to the cabin, or whatever. And you can worry about them. Where did they go? So a great thing to do also, just so they won't be so scared of fireworks and just loud noises, and in general just be less skittish and more chilled, is by training them with a starter's pistol. And this just shoots blanks. Like it will not shoot like real bullets at all. So it just shoots, makes a loud bang. And what you do with this is you start really small. You start with something called acorn blanks. They don't make a lot of noise. They do, but they're not very loud. And then you build up to louder blanks. So that's like a blank cartridge, which is essentially just like, just gunpowder, right? And it goes boom, but there's no projectile, right? So you load this up and you shoot it in the air. Let's say as you're playing fetch, it's like simulates like a gunshot as you're playing fetch, like it would go retrieve a duck or a grouse or whatever, or just a game like that, and then that gets them very used to these loud noises. You start with a small, quieter noise, and once you get used to that, you move your way up. Another thing, you can use that starter's pistol to train a dog that's already skittish. And this is where it can come in handy, because it's very challenging to train a dog that's already gun shy to not be gun shy anymore. So it's great to start them as young as possible. Like I started North on this when he was a pup, and it's just been, at the time it was during the peak of the pandemic, and you couldn't get, it was like the last one I could find. It cost me an arm and a leg, but it's been so worth it. Because he's just been a less skittish, more chilled dog. You see some dogs, if the broom falls over and hits on the floor, they jump up and they run. North barely bats an eye. That's because of that training. But if you do have a skittish dog, you get with the acorn blanks. You get acorn blanks. You start with the smallest blank, and you get the dog really excited, really happy. You get some treats. You're playing with it. Hey, you shoot it. Hey, you keep playing. Give it a treat. Shove treats in its mouth. You know what I mean? And that gets him. And maybe somebody else has the blanks a little bit further away, and you don't have the starter's pistol. They do a little bit further away, and you get them excited. And sometimes they'll stop, but you don't even pay attention. You get them excited again, and you move that sound a little closer. You move your blanks up to a little bit louder ones, and in a surprisingly small amount of time, that skittish dog that's really scared of loud noises will become less scared. Even if it's just fireworks and stuff like that, a lot of the time, it's nice to have a dog that doesn't run away. And here's something else I have. Here's Norse sort of X-back. This is his an X-back harness. This one, somebody was commenting that it's a little too big. It was made for buck. North's not even 2 yet. It is a little bit too big in the front, but one good thing about it is that the sides here come down a little bit further down the side of his back legs, as opposed to pulling right down from like the base of his tail. So those back legs don't get crouched down so much, so it's not so harsh on his hips. And he can just kind of have a more natural gait. So that works great. Another thing, adventuring with your dogs that I definitely recommend, especially if you have Huskies and Malamutes and Northern breeds that kind of look like coyotes and wolves, is a good blaze orange vest. This one's really built well. It's made by Carhartt, this one. You probably don't need to get one that built this well. But this does the trick. And, if you're taking your dog out in hunting season, you know what I mean? Why not just have a little bit of extra visibility for them? Obviously, people, you're going to know that a wolf's not wearing this. This also has reflectors on it too. So I'd recommend that if you're in the fall moose hunting, deer hunting season. Doesn't hurt to bring one of those at all. And then what else do I have here? Here's North's life jacket. So Buck was, a bush dog. He could just, North's actually a really good swimmer too. Buck would just swim across lakes for fun. When I was a kid, I had one dog that he got scared by fireworks, and we had a water access camp, and so it was like Canada Day or Victoria Day, and we were probably like 4 or 5 kilometers away on the other side of this large lake, and my dog kind of ran away. He was scared of fireworks, and we ended up having to leave without it. And it would just come back to our neighbors, and we go get him tomorrow. The next morning, he was on the dock across the bay. So it ran down shore and probably swam over 3 kilometers, crossed a point, and we went and picked him up from the dock. Knew exactly how to get home. Incredible. But if you got to be careful also that they could sort of overheat too in a life jacket. But still, good thing to have. They'll be safer. When we took Buck on like the Mountain River in the Northwest Territories, which is ice cold water and just consistent ripping current, we got him one of these when he's getting a bit older. It's the same one North wears. It's got kind of the top is sort of perforated, so it breathes a bit. It's got a good amount of flotation. It's not too bulky, so they can swim pretty well on it. And what's great, it's got these grab handles too. So you have something to kind of grab onto your dog. So I can literally, I can grab this here and be in the side of the canoe and just tilt the canoe over and pull my dog right into the canoe without having to grab his collar and probably a lot more comfortable with him. This one's by Salis. Great dog. I haven't used a lot of different kind of life jackets because I'm not a dog, so I wear human life jackets, which is true. But that's the only one I've used for dogs, and it's amazing. So I like that one. A few other kinds of harnesses here. Good place that makes custom harnesses. If you want to get a dog harness, this is Acco Sports. They're out of Ontario, close to the Quebec border, but Acco Sports, AKKO Sports. You can take a specific list of measurements and send it to them. So you take measurements on your dog and send it to them, and they'll send you back a good harness. They're very reasonably priced too. I really like that. And then for anybody that's interested in doing some videography, super fun to get some dog GoPro footage, right? This is a dog camera mount harness. It's actually by Garmin. GoPro makes one that's like more of elastics. It kind of moves around, and you can mount your GoPro to this as well with the proper mount. So I like this one a bit better. It sometimes kind of drifts off to the side a bit. It's kind of challenging, but if anybody's seen the dog footage, the dog camera footage, the dog cam, that's this right here. And so you put this on the dogs and you can get some fun footage. And I've even seen footage of them doing stuff I didn't know they're doing. Like one of the dogs, we were really thirsty, and I see the dog footage, and it's going gluk, 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 and it's drinking. And it found a spring I didn't even know was there. And then you hear like, buck, buck, us calling, and the dog doesn't hear because it hears the sound of the stream, and then perks up his head and looks, and it runs all the way back, and we find him and pat him, and we're going, oh geez, I'm so thirsty. And so the dog found the spring we never even found, and I didn't realize that until after I watched the footage, weeks later. So that's a pretty fun thing to do. Another thing I think that really helps, guys, I'm telling you here, is a freaking shock collar. Okay, I know people are like, don't use a shock collar. I was one of those people too, until I realized that you don't actually have to shock the dog for it to work amazingly well. So a shock collar has like a dial, and you can use a kind of a little bit of an electric shock, and you can crank that up stronger, or you can crank it down, or, which is what I do, I never even use the shock thing. I just use a little buzz button. So it literally feels like a pager, or when your phone's on vibrate. That's what it feels like. So you can put it against your own neck, and which I would do right now, but I don't have it in front of me. You put it on your own neck, and it just buzzes. Bzz, bzz. So you don't actually have to use the shock setting. And I didn't really know. So I thought, oh, I'm shocking my dog, I'm hurting them. Not the case at all. And then also, I didn't really understand how this worked. I thought that you'd have to train them to use the shock collar. Instead of what happens is that you just buzz it, and they get weirded out, and they just run back to you. So we had an issue with some neighbors that didn't like our dog going on their property. And so we used the shock collar to like really train the dog to, and also my wife Tori to not go on their property. And so when we watch the dog going, and then we buzz the dog like this, and then also Tori uses it for training for North when she's running. So Tori will go on these like 9K bike rides, and North will just run full speed behind her the whole time. But there's no sidewalks or anything where we live, so it's just like a long gravel road with very little traffic. So Tori will just buzz the shock collar as soon as she sees a car coming, and North will just run over, and North is triggered to just run over on her side of the road and get away, and never run into any issues. So like, honestly, they're expensive, but one of those shock collars, and and a starter's pistol. And these aren't things that you're going to take on your adventures with dogs, but they're going to be things that are going to make your adventures with dogs more enjoyable. So that's more stuff that you train them beforehand. Another great tip that came to me from somebody who trains police dogs, and this guy's like advanced level dog trainer. If you want your dog to come, this has been an amazing tip for me. Most people call their dog looks at them, and then they keep calling, come here. Then finally, if the dog comes up to them, let's say it's 50, 100 meters away, if the dog then comes, then you say, good dog, and you pat the dog. Wrong. What you want to do is that, well, not wrong, but trust me, this works a lot better. What you do is you call the dog, even if it's 100 meters away. As soon as it turns its head and looks at you, you go, good boy! And then the dog just comes to you. They're good for hearing you and looking. They're not necessarily good for coming all the way back. So as soon as your dog looks back at you, you say good boy. And honestly, sometimes just saying good boy works better than calling them, or good girl or whatever, works better than actually calling their name. So I highly recommend trying that. Your dog doesn't come, it's dialed in, it's running after another dog. You call them, and they even twitch their ear, or they give you any acknowledgement whatsoever. That's when you say good boy, and you'll see that it's going to make a huge difference. So that's my advice. Again, training dogs, just get that little piece for sleds, that little piece of food, put it right in front of them, harness them up, put that little piece of food right in front of them, right out of their reach. And that'll get them to start moving the sled. Once they realize they can move the sled, they'll start being able to pull, and you move it further and further away, and so on. Next thing you know, they're pulling. If they're skittish of the sled, start with a really long rope. For canoeing, teach them in the boat. Now, you'll find you're probably already teaching them to get in and out of the truck or car, right? So you use the same thing in the car, right? In the truck, in the boat, right? So they probably already know that. I train my dog a little bit just with the boat on land by putting treats in it before the first trip. And then front of the boat, back of the boat. And that's kind of something, that other side that you kind of teach them, you kind of, don't beat them, but you kind of generally push them over with the paddle. Front of the boat, good dog. Okay, over there, good dog. You know what I mean? You can kind of, show them and then tell them they're good when they're in the spot. And you can get out there and you can paddle around. You can do a training trip. That's fine too. But, immersion out there, I think, works great. You might not want to take them on an advanced level whitewater trip your first time, right? So be smart, know your dog, use your common sense, and you're going to end up with an awesome canoe dog and have some really great, bonding moments, and enjoy your time and be safer and have more fun out there, for sure. So I think I've covered. Oh, how much time are we in here? Man, we're doing pretty good. We're just blasting through this. Yeah. So let me see. Starter's pistol. How to teach a dog to pull. Winter with dogs. Dog jackets. Why take a dog? Done that. So maybe I can get into a couple of good stories. With my dogs, and anybody that's kind of followed some of my trips over the years, you'll see that I've done some Arctic adventures with the dogs along on them. I've already, of course, told the bear story with Buck, and of course the story with North on this last trip. Waiting up for people and slowing us down to try to keep the pack together. I think one of the cool stories that my dog Buck did when we were on Ungava, and now Buck, he was an amazing dog, but I'm going to be honest, he wasn't like, if he was a dog, he probably wouldn't have been a lead dog. Because like some dogs, like North even more so, or my old dog Merlin he kind of knew where we were going, and he'd always want to be out front, and he'd be going where Buck, he would kind of follow you, and you had to turn around and call him, and he'd be more interested in other things. He'd be, okay, well, I guess we'll go, doop-de-doop-de-doo, you know what I mean? So you kind of have to kind of call him to come along. And he wasn't amazing necessarily at towing sleds. He did pull sleds as part of a team, but pulling a sled by himself beside me in the way that I travel, he didn't have a ton of experience with that. And so as we were getting towards the end of this trip, this is day 36, 370 kilometer long solo trek, up onto a 2,000 foot plateau, crossing Arctic Quebec, well above the tree line in the Arctic, just me and Buck out there. And I'm running low on food. So I've had to tightly ration everything because we were being hit by blizzard after blizzard. It knocked into our time by 9 days. So this time there's 9 days I couldn't travel on this trip. And so our food rations are low. I'm supposed to meet a snowmobile pickup once I get to Hudson Bay. And once I get to Hudson Bay, I've completed the crossing of Nunavut's Ungava Peninsula. And at this point, it's starting to get like spring. There's the snow on top of the hilltops is starting to melt, and there's exposed rock and stuff like that. And Buck keeps getting stuck behind me, and I'm really trying to make time to snow. At this point, the snow is also softer, so I'm sinking in. Everything's harder. Not enough food. I'm hungry, and so I keep coming all the way back. Buck will be barking like he's stuck, and I'll keep coming all the way back. And then right before I get back to get Buck unstuck, he just get free by himself. And I'm carrying this pulk too. And so the pulk's got straps you have to do up like this, and you have to get it over your head in the right way and do this. So to take it off is really time consuming. And I'm just oh my God, this is going to be the death of me, especially when a blizzard's blowing in and you're feeling stressed out. We're talking about extremely remote conditions here. So for some reason, Buck was just not doing the best. So I have to come back, get Buck unstuck, and then he'd be happy that I came back to get him. And then just about his own happiness, he'd pull himself free from what he was stuck on, a rock or a snowbank or something. I was Buck, please, I don't even think I had any dog treats left at this point either. I would have tried to get him to naturally come and use it as a training opportunity, right? Well, he as the day went on, I think that was our second last day or last day. And on the last day, finally, I get to this huge, probably 250 foot esker of just crushed rock and sand and boulders and everything. I don't even know if it was an esker, just a huge mound of hill that came down into the next river valley, but just rocks and boulders and snow and steep, hard to get up. I think 250 feet high, right? And once I got up that, I can get down, and then I was getting close, and I would have made it to Hudson Bay. And so I'm starting to go up this hill, and I have to make it to Hudson Bay. I have no food left. I'm meeting my pickup the next morning, who's coming from Akulavik. So I was it's probably 20 kilometers from Akulavik, but I couldn't really make it any further because the snow on the sea ice was all thick and slushy, and I had no food, and so plus I can't even get in touch with this guy, so very challenging. And I had to make it, and so I'm going up this hill. I'm weaving around boulders, very challenging thing. And I just saw as I'm getting up there, I'm oh geez, there's no way that Buck's gonna make it up this hill. And then I'm I'm gonna have to drop my toboggan. I'm gonna have to go down, and I'm gonna have to get Buck's toboggan. I'm gonna have to weave his toboggan through this boulder field, and we're not gonna be getting to Hudson's Bay at dark, and will I even find it? And all these questions are going through my head. Well, I turn around at the top, and I can't believe it, but Buck is just doing it. He's just, something clicked in him, and he's just making up this hill, and he looked just happy, and he's following my track, and he's weaving around these boulders, and he's hitting patches of just dry sand and rocks, and just pulling the toboggan over and finding his way around and up a steep hill like this. And like he got to the top and I'm like, I don't believe it. You did it, Buck. And he did it and prevented me from using my last drop of energy from having to go all the way back down there and then forcing me to go through a dangerous boulder field in the pitch black to get to Hudson Bay. So Buck like just totally came through and saved the day on something that probably even like a high-end pro sled dog would have had trouble doing. And I suppose he was a high-end pro sled dog. And sure enough, that night, right before dark, we made it to Hudson Bay and we completed our 36-day solo crossing of the Ungava Peninsula, which like felt amazing. So it was like such a triumphant thing for Buck to do. Hey Tor, yeah. Should we take questions? How long's it been so far?
Well, there's a question in there.
Okay, has it been an hour yet? Yes. It has. Wow, I've been blabbing for an hour. That's my producer Tori. It's a very professional way that we communicate during these live chats. Oh, here's one. Yo, Jim and Tori, I worry about my dog in the bush versus wolves and attracting bears. Not to worry. I mean, you know, I don't know, man. Like, your dog won't attract bears. I wouldn't say like, you know, I've heard people that have issues with sled dogs, and this is you know, maybe more only grizzly bears and stuff, but like dogs that are permanent outside dogs that are tied to a pole, that are tied up, you know. If your dog was to get stuck in a trap, maybe a wolf will get it. And dogs do get wolves, have been eaten by wolves before. If anything, I don't think the dog's going to attract bears. It's going to actually keep bears away from you. So one of the reasons, like I remember there's this guy, Michael Manzo, he was on Life Below Zero, The Next Generation. And he's this native guy originally from Maine. And Manzo now lived in Alaska, runs a dog team, makes his own canoes, builds motors, builds river canoes. Really interesting and smart bush guy. And he saw the video I put out when Buck died, and he called me up and he's like, man, I know the feeling to have a good dog. He's like, I like you because you know dogs, and you know, I've seen some of your trips and you're going into the bush without a dog, and you never go into the bush without a dog. He told me. And so, you know, most of the time when a dog does get eaten by a bear, it's because the dog sacrificed itself for you not to get eaten. So if the dog does get eaten by a bear, that's because you lived and you weren't eaten by a bear. So that's the majority of the situation. So if anything, the dogs are going to keep the bears away. You know, if you have a female dog in heat, you know, it might attract wolves a little bit more. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and wolves don't necessarily like dogs. But like, here's a story. For example, I had this dog that was a herding dog. It's like part Great Pyrenees and part Border Collie. And it was like black lab, looked like a really small, like Newfoundland dog. But I was up in the bush, and we were crossing between an island and the mainland, and we were about to cross between an island and the mainland, and I see a lone wolf walking this way. One of my dogs was pulling a sled and one wasn't. And I was kind of looking at us, like, what are we? Well, it crossed over this island, and I thought, okay, it's going to wait for us to pass. But sure enough, it came out, not close, but like close enough, and was like kind of doubling back and looking at us. And then it went around, it skipped this narrows and wisely avoided some what might have been thin ice. Well, my one dog that's a herding dog runs after this wolf, chases after this wolf. And so the wolf's running away and the dog's running away. So I just see the wolf run into the woods and the dog run into the woods right after it. And so I just whistle really, really loudly. And about 5 minutes later, the dog just came back. But to me, it looked like the wolf was, this big timber wolf was suckering the dog into the bush. And maybe it was, but maybe my whistling scared the dog away. So, you know, moral of the story here is, even in that situation, if the wolf didn't eat my dog, in all the situations where I've been in the bush with my dog, you know, and for me to have never really, other than that, have any remote situation where, like, use your common sense. Sometimes a dog that's a herding dog might be more likely to kind of seek out wolf calls or something like that. And I've heard these stories, but overall, like, your chance of your dog getting eaten by wolves, if unless it's like running way far away from you by itself, or if it gets stuck in a trap in the winter, is what I would consider to be highly unlikely. I would consider that to be highly unlikely. So yeah, if you're looking at just going camping, bringing your dog on a canoe trip, having them around at camp, bringing them on a winter camping trip, and they're going to be kind of with you or around you all the time, I'd say that your concerns on wolves bothering them are extremely low. I'd also say that your chances on them attracting bears would actually do the opposite. They'd help keep bears away from you. So I hope that helps. Isn't recall harder with bush dogs or those that have husky in them? I'm always amazed at how North sticks. Yeah, so he's asking if it's harder to call, if it's harder to get, a husky or a northern dog to come when they're called. And he's impressed with how well North sticks with us. From my experience, I think a lot of people that have issues with huskies, they're huskies that are bought from a breeder in like Toronto. You know what I mean? This isn't all the time, but I think so. I think huskies, like, bad reputation has been ramped up because they've been selectively bred to look a certain way and not act a certain way. So a lot of times when you have like a bush dog that's been bred to act a certain way as opposed to bred to make more of them, to sell more, that look good, you get a dog that's mentally better than a dog that looks like a perfect husky but potentially gets a little inbred and has more of those negative traits. Also, from what I've noticed, if you do a lot of fun things with your dog, especially your northern dog, it's a lot less likely to run away because it thinks that it's going to miss whatever the next fun thing that you're going to do is. Also, if you don't have a fence, as soon as they see a fence, they're going to look for a perimeter to get out, and they're going to get out and go do something, right? But if you don't have a fence, a lot of the time they just don't bother to try to escape and they just sit there. But that being said, I think it is probably more work. I've had Samoyeds too, Samoyeds when I was a kid that did run away, but again, they were in a fenced-in area. They were bored. You know what I mean? We're taking North on, Tori's taking North on big runs. We're going hiking. We're taking him on canoe trip. He's worried that if he leaves too long, he's going to miss out on the next fun thing. And you know what I mean? So that helps. Also, though, that being said, it is harder to recall your dog. So with North, huskies are kind of like, it's almost like they're puppies for 2 years. So you have to kind of keep on training them. So with North, he learns, but then he kind of forgets. Where some other dogs, you train him, then they kind of forget. You train him again, then it kind of sticks. So we're having to kind of train him. We're trying to use, because it's really important to us. Recall is like the most important thing when your dog comes, when it's called. It's like the most important thing. And so we do use the shock collar, which we typically just use on vibrate. Works amazingly well. Treats. But again, you're going to have to, I don't know about all huskies, but they're free thinking, and you're going to have to just spend more time to train them. Even when they learn, you got to just train them again, and then train them again, and then, a bit of a work in progress until they're like, over 2, from my experience. But then they really get chill when they hit about 3 or 3.5 or 4. I hope that helps from my experience. I'm not an expert in that field. What's the number one rule tip to ensure a dog is good in a boat canoe? What's the number one rule tip to ensure a dog is good in a boat or canoe? I mean, like I was saying, I don't know if you can break it down to the number one rule or tip, but probably like it's hard to get them to lie down sometimes, and just getting to lie down and get that center of gravity lower is important. But overall, getting them to be good in a canoe. Also, the other thing is telling them other sides, just getting them to balance the boat. Sometimes they sit on one side. If you say other side, I use that command, which just means like just move and just kind of like, doesn't necessarily mean go all the way to the other side, but just kind of move and get this boat a little more balanced out. I think that is pretty freaking good too. But overall, I'd say if you're on a canoe trip, if you're going to be getting out, getting in the canoe at portages, at camp, getting in to go fishing, all this kind of stuff, what's going to make your life way easier is just in the boat, out of the boat. That's not really going to make them better in the canoe per se, but if your dog gets in and out of the canoe exactly when you want it to, your life is going to be way easier and more fun out there. So I'd say that's the most important command: in the boat, out of the boat. Hope that helps. Do you ever have trouble with black flies or ticks on my dog? Well, usually where I go, like where I live, there's no ticks. So that's helpful. So I've never really had an issue with ticks. I definitely, where I used to live, there was some, and I had to pull a couple out of buck. So yeah, tick extraction kit for sure. Muskol also has a kind of repellent that's good against ticks. Black flies, can be tough, especially dark. Black flies and mosquitoes seem to like black colors. But for dogs that have thicker fur, they get up around, they're twigging berries there, and the black flies will bite them. That's why you'll see them kind of dig a bit of a hole and crouch under it, or get under the bushes. But in general, I guess I wouldn't really say that I have problems with it, other than the dog, when we let them go in the tent or in a bug shelter, they learn pretty quick that that's pretty nice to get away. And then a lot of the time when they're out on the portage trail, they're running and they're moving around, so the bugs don't really have time to get them. And then when they're on the canoe, you're out kind of in the wind, so they're not as bad. But yeah, in general, dogs are going to get some bug bites. They're going to get some mosquito bites. And, at the end of the day, so are you. I'm sure, they'd probably rather be out there than not be. But I've taken my dogs, and a lot of sled dogs and outdoor dogs deal with repellents that you can use if your dog has shorter fur and the bugs can get at them. There's even kind of a little salve that you can put on the nose. So in areas like in Churchill, Manitoba, they call them bulldogs. We call them horseflies here. They get really bad, and those dogs can bite. Those can bite the dog's nose a lot and even leave like scar tissue. So it's like a pink kind of salve that protects that upper nose from horsefly bites. That's that dog sledders use in Churchill. I forget what it's called, but that works really well too. And I guess that's kind of about it. I still bring my dog when it's black fly bug season and all that kind of stuff too. So hi Jim, I love your videos. Thank you. We have a dog harness for our husky. How do we start training him to take little sled trips? So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but what I would do for sure, and you can even start in the summer. If you have a sled, you put some weight in, and that's great. If you have an old tire, you can tie a rope to the tire. That works good. Get the harness on them. Get them used to wearing the harness. So even if you put a treat in their harness in the house, and they rummage through the harness and find the treat, leave the harness on them. At first, when you're putting it on, they're going to be a little weirded out maybe, and they'll be like, what is this thing? The first few times they might not like it. That's how North was. Now when you pull it on, he runs over to get it on. Leave the harness on them in the house. Get them used to the harness for sure. I didn't mention that before. That's key. And then what you do Did you get them? You can start with a little bit of a longer rope than you would when you're out there. Not a bad idea, just so the toboggan from behind them doesn't spook them. And then what their biggest problem is going to be at first is just knowing how to get the sled moving. So a lot of dogs think they're tied up as if they're tied to a post, and you say, come on, but they won't go. They think they're tied up. Well, what you do is you take a little treat, and they let them pull as far as they can, and they think they can't go anymore, and then you put that treat right here, and then sure enough, they'll go, and they'll get it, and they'll get the sled moving, and they'll realize they got something moving, and then you do that again and again, and then all of a sudden, they just realize that they can pull the thing, and they just go. And then they see you pulling one, and they know that's just what everyone's doing today. Even, it'd been a while since I'd had North trained to pull a sled. It was last winter. He's only like one, maybe like 20 months old or something. And so I was wondering before this Temagami trip if he'd even remember. Well, sure enough, we started going, and there's North, doesn't realize he can pull his sled, and I double back and I did that exact trick, just a little treat as far as he can reach and just right out of the thing, and he got it, another one, and after that he clicked and he pulled the whole way. So I'm sure your dog's going to be amazing if you just use those strategies. Get him used to the harness, get him pulling. That technique was taught to me by a guy who actually won the Iditarod. And he had a really good dog he showed me that wouldn't pull at all, that now was one of his best dogs just using that technique. So I hope that helps. I don't know how you did that trip with 2 adults, 2 kids, and North. Was that fun to watch? That was fun to watch. Yeah. I guess you're talking about the Budnick brothers. Xander and Max were pretty impressive on that trip. Like, Xander maybe doesn't have the same like bush experience as me, but the guy's like, quite a bit younger. And
About the French River.
oh, are you?
You're talking about the French River.
Oh, you're talking about the French River? I thought you were joking, making fun of. Sorry, Xander. It reminded me of his video canoeing with a boy and 2 kids. Anyways, yeah. So, my bad. Yeah. So, honestly, I thought you were just joking, but like, let me talking about that trip. North was the easy one on that trip. Like, for example, it was very challenging to do the trip with the kids because you're worried about their safety. And also everything's way more work. So you got to get up. And of course, our son Wesley has disabilities. Feeding Wesley in the morning takes time. You got to feed him by hand. Keeping Hudson entertained, keeping him safe at a campsite. He likes to go exploring. All these things take up more time than sometimes they don't want to. They get grumpy. They don't want to be in the canoe for that long. They got to get out. So you really have to draw back. You really have to roll with the punches. And also, yeah, like at the end of the day, being out there, everything has risks. At the end of the day, statistically, driving on a 2-lane highway is more dangerous. If you're going to do stuff with kids too, you got to make sure you have the skills first. Then you're going to have to draw those skills back, reduce your expectations on how far you're going to make it, how challenging a trip you're going to do. You want to reduce those. But in the end of the day, you'll find that you have just as much fun. And honestly, when you're out there with your kids, the anxiety or the fear of what you might get doing a big trip might bring you, you feel that because you just know that it's going to be more work, and you're also just worried that everybody's going to be safe, and a little bit of worrying is a good thing because it usually makes sure everybody is safe. So I guess North was the least of our concerns out there with the 2 kids, but we both are planning another family trip. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. I'm glad that you enjoyed that. Definitely teamwork was a big part of that with Tori and I. Tori would kind of get the kid. I'd get up earlier. I'd get kind of breakfast, get this going. Tori would kind of wake up with them, get them changed into their clothes, entertain them for a bit. We definitely had to work as a team to make that all happen. And you know, you have to carry more stuff. We had a larger canoe, an 18-foot canoe, which reminds me, I don't know if anybody saw my Facebook post today, everybody, but we have our own show now on National Geographic. So the show is basically just more or less following me and Tori and our lives in general, and the trips, focusing on the trips that kind of we do as a kid, we do with the kids, us going out by canoe, on foot, looking at different areas of the back country. One of the things we want to do is we want to buy a rural like water access property and build a cabin and sort of spend more and more time there. We've learned how good being in the outdoors is for Wesley having Fox G1 syndrome, and how beneficial that seems to be for his development. And so the show is kind of covering all these things, what kind of our lives here and the trips we do as a family and stuff like that too. So it's May 2nd. Check it out, National Geographic Channel, and then May 31st, National Geographic Channel at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central, and then it's going to be out on the 31st on Disney Plus. So yes, we have a National Geographic TV and Disney Plus show, which actually, when we all went up to the Yukon, we did a drive on the Alaska Highway, and we stayed in this log cabin, this remote, well, it wasn't really that remote, but we stayed in an off-grid log cabin in the Yukon and did a bunch of activities out there. We went winter camping, ice fishing, snowmobiling, and just kind of dog sledding, you name it. We lived out of this cabin and filmed it. That's what interested National Geographic in that's what they saw, and that's why they called us up and did that. So we, it was a long story, but we ended up kind of making lemonade out of lemons with that trip in the first place. And during the pandemic, we had to quarantine once we got to the Yukon, and that's why we were there, because we were quarantining. So we decided, okay, we're going to quarantine in this remote cabin, and we shot a video of it, and it ended up leading to a National Geographic series. So it all worked out pretty good. So everybody check that out. Any more questions, Tori? No, it's the same one about the kids. Oh, really? Yeah. I'm sure. Okay, yeah, for some reason it's not coming up. Sorry, a little technical difficulty here. Yeah, so the question is, how did you get Buck to sit on top of the spray deck? Well, I guess we started with, Buck didn't even like getting in things at all when we got him. Like, he didn't like getting in anything. So the first time we kind of had to actually pick him up and put him in the boat on the beach, and I had to hold 2 paddles to deflect him from getting out of the boat until the water got deeper and he didn't want to jump out anymore. But then once he realized that we were going fun places and he was going to have fun, he started getting in and out of the boat. And then eventually when we had a spray deck on, he kind of just figured, okay, well, getting in the boat is the same thing with getting in spray deck. And so we just used the commands in the boat, out of the boat, and they work just like in the car, out of the car, and they work just as well for him getting on the spray deck as they did for getting into the boat. And I think we used treats the first few times with the boat on land. That helps Drew. In the boat, he sees the treat, and then he naturally gravitated to getting on top of the spray deck, which is super comfy for him because it was kind of like a little hammock there a little bit, or there's nice bags full of our sleeping bags and clothes on top, or a little groove between 2 bags. And so he really liked it up there. But yeah, good question. Yeah, for some reason it's not working, the questions, hon? What adventure is next with North? Good question. I'm doing a big trip this year, similar to going to the Yukon or something like that. And I don't know if I'm going to bring him, but I would say, yeah, I'm going to bring him on a spring trout fishing trip, Northern Ontario. I'm going to bring him on a whitewater canoe trip, not far from my house. I'm going to bring him on probably 3 or 4 day trip down the lower Magnetawan River. And what else? Geez, that's probably about it for now. Tori and I are probably going to get out on a trip, the two of us. We're going to do that. So, yeah, coming up, next month into June, you're going to see North out there on a lot of trips with us. And then I might even bring him on the big trip that I do, the big expeditionary trip, which is going to be another big solo trip that I do this summer. So lots of trips coming up for North. Yeah, Tori, I can't figure, this thing doesn't work. No? Okay. Okay, well, I guess that is about a wrap. If anybody has one last question, I'd be happy to answer it. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this chat about adventuring with dogs. I hope that you enjoyed some of the stories and that maybe you learned a thing or two. This conversation is going to be up on my YouTube channel permanently eventually, so you can share it from there. You can comment if you have any other questions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also drop some comments if you have any other questions on my Facebook page, Jim Baird Adventurer, or on my Instagram account at JB Adventurer. I'll answer them as soon as I can. I'll answer as many as I can there as well. And yeah, thanks to Muskoka Brewery for making delicious beers and partnering with me on these live chats. And make sure next month you tune in a month from now. I'll be doing another live chat. And I'm also going to be starting to do a podcast. So we got a Nat Geo TV series. Oh, one more thing. Nat Geo TV series. I'm going to be posting a 2-hour documentary from a crazy Arctic expedition that my brother and I did in 2010, I believe. So in the Western Arctic, where we crossed Great Bear Lake, crossed the Northwest Passage, all the way up to Uluhukto. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be dropping on my YouTube channel next week. This week's video is going to go live tomorrow. And TV show, lots of videos to come. I'm just going to keep sharing what I do and keep on doing adventures. I'm going to be putting in a pretty interesting workshop, garage here that I'm going to be building myself. I'm hoping to share a bunch of that as well too. That keep me pretty busy for about the month of June. So we're going to be building that and sharing some of the things we learn on that unique build too. So yeah, lots of stuff to come. Thank you very much, and tell all your friends to check out my channel too. I really appreciate everybody's support, and hope you like the chat today. Thank you. I was just trying to end it, yeah.
Did you do it?
Yeah, I said, no, I don't think I did. No. They're probably still listening right now.
It still says live. I think you just have to hit the X.